um, forward to this panel discussion from a very different regional perspective as well with Jessica Perez and Tatiana Becerra. And I'm also very happy that we have two discussants who are researchers who are actively working with the Center for Urban Studies, Nikhil Mathew and Harisa PA. They will be also the respondents as well as moderators after Jessica and Tatiana's presentations. So let me welcome both of them to the stage and also hand over the mic to Nikhil and Harisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Verghese. Good evening to all joining from India, and good afternoon to all joining from Europe, and good morning to all from North America. So I'm Nikhil, and I will be one of the moderators for the talk today, along with my colleague Harisa. So as mentioned, we both are associated with the Urban Center at MGill University, and I'm really excited about today's last presentation, I believe, because it's going to talk about the transformation caused by the pandemic in Latin America and the strategies rural instructors have figured out to circumvent digital divide. And I believe there's a similar thing that we are experiencing too. So, I think the floor is yours, Jessica. And I welcome Jessica and Tatiana. So we will intervene when it's the right time. So we don't want to waste any more time. Let's get straight to it.
So much. Thank you so much for to everyone. We feel very happy for being here. We feel very honored for being invited. And well, the purpose of our presentation is, as Mathew and Nikhil were saying, is to share a little bit of Latin America from our perspective. So in order to do that, I think I will share our presentation. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. All right, it's visible then. So as Nikhil was saying, the name of our presentation is Ubiquity of Digital Spaces, Constraints for Teaching in Rural or Under-Resourced Communities, and Cultural Implications. We're going to talk about the context of how we lived the transition from in-person teaching to the digital spaces in such a sudden shift with the pandemic. So towards the end of our talk, we would like to share two stories, two real stories that we have witnessed, and how these two stories have cultural implications, especially for education, for in the field of education, which is the field we both, Tatiana and myself, are involved in. So this is what we want to share with you today. My name is Jessica Perez. I am a master's. I am from Mexico. I've been an English teacher since 2007. So for about some years, I've been involved in the field, both as a teacher, as a coordinator of English programs, and also as an English teacher trainer. So from all of those, we have gathered a lot of cultural points, and how and something that Tatiana and myself do a lot is to share how we experience English teaching both in Mexico and in Colombia. So Tatiana will introduce herself and we will move on with the presentation. Thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And thank you to the organizers for the invitation to share a little bit about our countries. We are very, very honored to be here, and we thank you, all the organizers and the attendees. I know that in India it's very late. And so I thank you for staying this late to listen to us. And yeah, so my name is Tatiana Becerra Posada. And well, that's a cultural thing for Latin America. We use our last names, our mother and father's last names. So that's why we have two last names. I always get asked that question, like, why do you have two last names? And I love to be called by my two last names as well. It's like a very, very cultural thing. And it's also tied to my identity as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I am an English teacher as Jessica. Actually, that's one thing that has made us friends as we became students in McGill, like sharing this interest for English language teaching, this interest for education, but also for our cultures. So yeah, today we will focus a little bit on how these digital spaces, especially the case of WhatsApp, we will focus on, has become such a useful tool during the pandemic, but also we will discuss like how this also has other cultural implications. So here we have a picture of the American map, and as you can see, Colombia and Mexico are located in different positions. Actually, like I was asking Jessica last week, like for you, Mexico is in North America or in Central America? Because, for example, in my country, and I know that in other South American countries, we are taught, oh no, Mexico is part of Central America. But I know that for Mexicans and for people in the United States and Canada, Mexico is part of North America. So I was talking about that with her, and I find it very interesting. Like, where do you actually locate your country? You know, like that's also an interesting discussion. And well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that usually we as Mexicans are told that we are part of North America, but since North America, that's what they tell us in school and everywhere. But since we don't speak English as a mother tongue, we are not considered as North American. I wouldn't go around the world saying I'm North American. I would instead say I'm Latin American, even though my country is located in that geographic position. The fact that my mother tongue is Spanish makes me consider myself as Latin American more than North American.
Yeah, well, and Colombia is like the first country that you find at the top of South America. So it's right there next to Venezuela, and yeah, it's surrounded by two oceans, the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean as well. So and that's a commonality that we have with Mexico as well. Mexico is also bordered by the two oceans. And despite being in different parts of the continent, despite being away for thousands of kilometers, like we share many commonalities. This is not to say that our cultures are the same, because they are not. But we share similarities, and these similarities, we were discussing them as we prepared for this presentation, especially to know like how WhatsApp, that is a social interaction, social messaging platform that is used widely in both of our countries, has also similar implications for education. Yeah, so as I was telling you, the purpose of this presentation is mainly to discuss the implications of using a widely used social media platform in educational settings, and especially how this use has emerged because of a lack of access to digital or internet technologies, as is the case, for example, in rural communities in Colombia and in under-resourced communities in Mexico that we will share with you today.
So some of the background that we would like to talk about, as you may know, as we have been discussing in this symposium, in this conference, since COVID-19 began in both Colombia and in Mexico, schools were officially closed in March 2000, in the middle of March 2020. So as I was saying, we as educators were told to shift from one day to another, from in-person teaching to remote teaching, with all the implications it had, such as deficient training from teachers, such as deficient equipment, both in schools and in local houses, and also affecting kids who were not used in the use of technologies for education, except for checking emails or doing homework from time to time, but not remote teaching per se. So according to UNESCO, more than 826 million students worldwide did not participate in school during COVID pandemic due to a lack of access to technological devices and the internet. And this was the case in many places of Mexico, especially rural spaces and under-resourced spaces, even though they are part of the urban sector. We're going to be talking about how WhatsApp was a platform that seemed to be adequate or accessible to all. And in a minute, we will provide more details about it. So something important to say is that the disruption of in-person classes within the pandemic has exacerbated inequalities for rural learners to develop critical digital literacies. Since there used to be an over-reliance on paper-based materials, deficiency on internet connectivity, limited access to technological devices, and of course, low skills in producing new media have all of them been shown to constrain rural communities, rural and under-resourced, I insist. Even though there are plenty of platforms around the world, such as Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, Moodle, in many cases of both Mexico and Colombia, WhatsApp was chosen as the most accessible or the most adequate platform. Why? Because it's so popular. It didn't require a specific training such as Moodle or Microsoft Teams. And also, besides its popularity, it has a very low cost, since phone providers have made it accessible for everyone. So Tatiana is going to tell us some data about what's happened in Latin America.
Yeah, I also want to follow up on what you were saying about these technological tools that were included in many educational settings. In Colombia, for example, there are many schools that were and still are currently using Google Meets and even Moodle platforms. But the thing, for example, with rural schools is that even the use of or the access to Wi-Fi data is very limited. So what they did was that they mainly switched to asynchronous teaching. So it was completely remote, and it was through the use of handouts or guides that were sent to students through WhatsApp. That was like the cheapest way to access the internet in this context. So WhatsApp also became the means for sharing the educational materials or the mediations that the students needed at that time, or still need at that for education. Yeah. So why WhatsApp is so used in Latin America, not only in Latin America, I would say, like in the global South, right? We found that more than 2 billion people around the world use WhatsApp. It is used in more than 100 countries, and it's used for many people. It says like 90% of devices, technological devices, have WhatsApp installed in 45 countries. So we can see that WhatsApp is almost like everywhere around the world, right? For the case of Latin America, can you go to the next one, please? We found that Latin America, along with South Asia and Southeast Asia, is one of the contexts where WhatsApp is the most important social medium. Actually, some figures about Latin America say that 93% of Argentinians, 92% of Colombians, and 91% of Brazilians between 16 and 64 years old use WhatsApp. So we can see that it is a widely used tool or social platform. Okay, Mexicans are also around the world's heaviest WhatsApp users. So these are figures from the Global Web Index report from the 2020. And also we found, as Jessica was mentioning, that the use of WhatsApp is very cheap in our countries. And this is due to the phone providers, which or who provide access to WhatsApp, unlimited access to WhatsApp without having to have Wi-Fi connection. So this is like a big advantage that WhatsApp has over other social media, such as, for example, Instagram or Twitter, that you need to have actually a Wi-Fi connection or a data in your phone to access this social platform. Yeah, and besides that, besides using WhatsApp for social interaction and for mainly for social interaction or for having, you know, relationships with people, with your family, with your friend, WhatsApp has become such an important element of the sociopolitics of Latin American countries. Maybe you recall that on October 4th, there was the collapse of WhatsApp and Facebook. So many people in Latin America couldn't communicate with each other because the WhatsApp was like collapsed. So there was no WhatsApp service, there was no Facebook service, and there was no communication. Actually, like for me, in my case, I couldn't communicate with my family in Colombia that day because they didn't have WhatsApp services that day. And beyond that, beyond just communicating with family, relatives, or friends, this had a very huge impact on politics and economics. And why? Because after the COVID pandemic came, WhatsApp has been so ingrained in our cultural and social interactions that WhatsApp has become like the motor of economy in our countries. Like, for example, many people sell goods through WhatsApp, work communication is done through WhatsApp. So WhatsApp has become like our habitat. And I want to cite here Jose Caparroso, who is the editor of Forbes for Latin America. And he referred to this collapse of WhatsApp as something that was a catastrophe. He said, Latin America lives on WhatsApp. And this is not an exaggeration. Like, most people in Latin America use WhatsApp for living and to make a living through WhatsApp. And he was saying, I am surprised by so many people underestimating how catastrophic this downfall has been. So yeah, for many countries, like in Canada and United States, the collapse of WhatsApp meant nothing for communication or for politics or economics, but in Latin America, it was a big catastrophe. So yeah, WhatsApp has such a big influence nowadays. this has become this way because of the lockdown that we lived in March last year and most of the 2020. And yeah, and people just found this the social platform as the main way for communicating and having all social relationships, work relation, educational relationships, religious relationships, all kinds of relationships have just turned to WhatsApp. Jessica will tell you a little bit more about this.
So, so what we have in this slide is WhatsApp and social practices. As Tatiana was sharing with us, in Latin America, WhatsApp, it's used for everything. I used to remember, I remember when it was 2013, yes, 2013, that I refused to use WhatsApp in my life. And I was refusing using it because I could hear that it was so popular, and I could hear that all people were into this social media that I didn't want to waste even more time in social media. If I was spending some time on Facebook or spending some time in other social platforms, I didn't want to use WhatsApp. But everything changed when I changed my job, and in 2014 I got another a position in a public institution in Mexico for the government of my state. And it really surprised me that one of the first things that my co-workers and my boss, one of the first things that they told me was, you need to have WhatsApp so we can include you in the WhatsApp chat that we use for work purposes. So I did that. I began using WhatsApp for my work because I was told that it was a requirement to let's put it like that. And since then, I haven't been able to escape from it. I use it for work. Well, when I was working, I use it for work purposes. People in Latin America, you can see, maybe it's not very visible, but people used to sell food. One of the most profitable entrepreneurships in Mexico and in Colombia is selling stuff, taking stuff home, and people make their living out of that. You can see that this group, it's for English teachers. In this group, it's like a network, like a professional network, where they share advertisements about congresses, or where they share didactic material, or where they share new techniques, or everything related to English teachers. Also, this one, it says Evangelio del Día, which is the gospel of the day. The gospel of the day, which is this one is for religious purposes. So I am included in all of these WhatsApp chats, but these are not the only purposes that we use WhatsApp for. In this one, I don't have any other. I don't think I'm included in other chats, but some people use it to have contact with those friends who are not who are not easy to spend time with. So it's a way of communicating with those loved ones who are away from us as well. So as we can see here, WhatsApp has been integrated into, since the pandemic, or even replaced formal educational activities. Some of the benefits of using WhatsApp, according to Seth D'Souza and Suarez Lentaron, it's greater in student engagement, since they use it for social practices or for social communication. Since they are in a habit of using it so frequently, they are engaged also in educational spaces. There is a willing participation and cooperation among students. And thus, because of interaction increases, it is also likely that students' motivation increases as well. There's a fluent and immediate communication. So some of the disadvantages are the rapid dynamics of group chats can be distracting. So some people can be part of a lecture or part of an educational interaction in WhatsApp, and because of other chats, they may lose the focus of what they were doing. And of course, what I was saying about my refusal of using it, it compromises time and dedication. It takes so much time to be answering messages or interacting in different social groups. Well, Tatiana will talk about some semiotics in WhatsApp.
Yeah, and actually this is also tied to what Jessica was saying about the distracting aspect of WhatsApp, and how hard it is to have, like discussions or conversations that usually occur, that could occur in a classroom, to have them in WhatsApp. And that's something that happened amidst the pandemic, because teachers, like, given the few resources or the little access, the limited access that our students have to internet to be able to access other video conferencing platforms, like most of us had to use WhatsApp to have these discussions. And I recall that many of my students would say, like, oh, I hate having the class discussions in WhatsApp, because people are just so used to using the stickers that I lose, like the thread of the conversation or the point of the conversation. And Jessica and I were thinking about this, about how WhatsApp is such a potential for different semiotic modes, and how people in our like in our countries, how WhatsApp users just display their creativity, but also they reflect their cultural values through the use of the WhatsApp stickers. This is a topic that has been researched, especially in the field of semiotics. For example, Gomez Cruz and Siles, they did a study of how these stickers are an important element of WhatsApp conversations in Mexico. And it's the same in Colombia. Like most of the conversations in WhatsApp are like more than 50% filled by stickers, and the other 50% are completed by written text, but also by audio. So it is so interesting how WhatsApp can help to this interplay of semiotic modes. So it's not like Facebook, where you usually have just like the visual text, right? There is also pictures. But also in WhatsApp, like in the same conversation, you can combine written text, oral text through the audio, but also this very yes.
Sorry, I think the microphone from Sree Devi could be turned off. Could you please turn one microphone off? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was telling you that these semiotic resources are or the interplay of semiotic resources, it's very rich in WhatsApp. So that makes WhatsApp conversations actually such an interesting field for study, for semiotics, but most importantly for studying, for example, critical discourse analysis, and see how, for example, the use of stickers reflects local values, but also translocal values. Like, for example, I don't know here if you can tell me if any of these stickers, have you seen them before? If any of these stickers, because for example, I've showed Jessica some of them and she was like, I have no idea what you want to tell me with these stickers. But there were some that, of course, she could identify. Okay, well, yeah, if no one wants to jump in, like I would say, like, for example, for Jessica, like she recognized the cat sticker, that it's a very popular sticker and it's used like not only in WhatsApp, right? but it's not used only in Mexico and Colombia, but in many places. And also the sticker that is, yeah, right, that one, that is El Chavo del Ocho, that is a character from a popular Mexican cartoon. And it has become like very popular all across Latin America. And I don't know in which other countries that it may be used. But yeah, so having the potential of translating meanings, right, across countries is like one of the affordances of WhatsApp. And here we can see like all the other stickers are like very popular from the region where I am from. So if I show some of these stickers even to other people from Colombia, from other region, it's probably that they don't know, for example, what the two stickers at the bottom mean, because they are very ingrained with my cultural values and idiosyncratics and all that. So yeah, it's so interesting how all these semiotic modes and this potential for meaning making can be included in WhatsApp, and also how this can be used in education, especially for language teachers. You know, like we can potentialize our students' meaning making potential, but also like we can develop critical discourse analytic skills for our students when they are able to identify the values and the cultural practices and the moralities that lie behind or beyond the use of these stickers.
Yes, and related to what Tatiana is saying, the use of stickers has been so common in Mexico and in Colombia that in many cases they have transcend the social the interaction with social purposes to educational purposes in our case. So right here you can see a screenshot, and these specific stickers are used for educational purposes with children. So in the case, this is an English teacher that uses stickers sometimes in Spanish and sometimes in English, and she uses them in order to provide feedback for children. Sometimes children go more with visuals than with visual text itself, and this is a way to engage young students into the use of this sort of technologies. So Gomez Cruz and Siles, with this study that they did about stickers and emoji, they concluded that emoji, stickers, and GIFs could not be understood with a pervasive presence of WhatsApp, but this platform cannot be associated without the use of the stickers. This is like, at least in Mexico, is the platform that we use on a daily basis for different aspects. And stickers represent the cultural components of Mexican life. So, and because this is talking about culture, and because this is a seminar about narratives and stories, we are going to share a couple of stories that we have witnessed and that we believe they have important cultural elements that you would be interested in. So Tatiana will begin.
Thank you. Yes, well, this story that I'm going to tell you, it's a story that occurred in interaction while I was interviewing some teachers, English teachers in rural communities in Colombia as part of my recent research. And for the purpose of this presentation, I have organized the story into the story structure that G 2008 highlights. So I have organized the story sections into setting, the catalyst, the crisis, the resolution, and the coda. And why am I telling you, or I'm decided to share these stories, because this story shows many institutional values that permeate the use of these tools such as WhatsApp for educational purposes. So for the setting of the story, the teacher decided that she would tell me what happened to hers once. So she said, to tell you, I tell you because it happened once to me. So she's preparing me in that moment to tell me that this is something that has happened to her. So it's an anecdote, a narrative that has happened to her before. And then she started telling me the catalyst of what happened. So she said, I posted a meme on my WhatsApp status, and she started laughing nervously. The meme said that we English teachers are bad for math. And this is actually like a common narrative in Colombia. I don't know if in Mexico as well or in other countries, but yes, people say like, oh, if you are an English teacher, you are terrible for math. Yes. So there are many memes around this narrative or stereotype. And so the teacher decided to share it on the WhatsApp status for just have a laugh with her colleagues who also, have WhatsApp and see each other's statuses. But the meme had a picture of the hangman game. I don't know if you are related with the hangman game, but it's like a picture of a man that is hanged by its neck, right? So she posted this in a very, simple way in her WhatsApp status. So what is the crisis of this? So she said, I posted the meme, of course, the math teachers and the school counselor texting me that it was me promoting suicide. So here, the school counselor, a member of her school board, was texting her, started to text her on the WhatsApp as well, accusing her of promoting these suicidal ideas because of the meme that she had posted that had the picture of the hangman. And so the teacher, how did the teacher resolve these anecdotes? She said, well, I told her, Miss, I hate to tell you this. And like telling her, well, I can post whatever I want. And she said, well, I even muted her statuses. So in this case, the teacher's resolution was to mute her statuses so that the other counselor could not see them. And then she ends this narrative with a coda. And she says, but after that time, I said, there are really people that you can post a meme and they will distort it. And this seems like a very simple story or a very simple narrative. But during the following interviews that I had with this teacher and with other teachers, they had similar stories like this one. And the most intriguing factor was that these stories or narratives or anecdotes had an impact on their teaching decisions. Like, for example, for this teacher, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So for the teacher, like in many ways, in other interviews, it come up as like, for example, she would say, I like to do it, but I try to be very prudent in the virtual class. So like she was saying, like, I try to post memes and things like that, but now I try to be very prudent. She also said, like, I try not to be controversial in social networks, precisely because if I am in favor or against abortion, I post something, then they are going to say, is that the Miss posted that she was in favor of abortion, for example. She said that. She also again said, but in the virtuality, I try to be very prudent. Or also say, but controversial themes, I'm truly afraid of them. So, and she referred to this anecdote again, like if it was just like a meme, that it was a joke about a stereotype, what would happen if you actually posted your opinion or posted a meme that was related, for example, to politics or to religion or to social conversations like abortion or things like that? Like she would say, like, I was truly afraid of them. So it was like really shocking to me to see like how this use of WhatsApp that has permeated social relationships in my country for many years, and that became the main tool of communication because of the pandemic, how the convergence of being widely used socially and now being used in education can have a censorship implications for teachers like this one, because what she was telling me is that she felt censored by her colleagues and even by the parents or the other students that might see her WhatsApp statuses, for example, or her, or things that she could share in a WhatsApp group and that can be distorted, as she said. So it's very interesting to see all the implications that the uses of WhatsApp in for example, in my country can have for teachers and for educators and for students. Can you go to the next one, please? Yeah, so I was thinking about how this has impacted the teaching of in these schools, for example. Like this teacher said, like, I try not to use controversial themes in the classroom, like, for example, talking about politics, but actually by doing so, like, how many opportunities for developing critical thinking or for having, critical discussions in the WhatsApp classroom are being lost because you don't feel safe in WhatsApp, right? Or you don't feel that WhatsApp is a safe space where you can freely discuss these topics without being censored, right? Also, how these institutional values are recycled in teachers' narratives, right? So for example, for the teachers, school counselor, she was recycling these institutional values, like, for example, policing what other teachers do in the class. But right now, the classroom is in WhatsApp, right? So you don't know what the limit between the classroom and real life is right now because everything is there. And as I already said, like, these institutional values are constraining teacher practices, especially for engaging in critical digital literacies. Yeah, now Jessica is going to continue with another story.
So this one is called, I used to write this title, A Story of Machismo, which, as you may know, it's very embedded, entrenched in cultural ideology, at least in Mexico. I didn't organize the story as Tatiana. Instead, I am going to tell it. And I hope to be clear. If I am not clear, I will finish the story. And if you have questions, that something that has made you confused, you can feel free to let me know. So this story of machismo is embedded also in the educational context, touches on the use of WhatsApp, and reflects critical cultural practices. And this is not my story, but it's a story of a very close friend of mine who shared it with me and who allowed me to share it with you because she considers it important. She is the principal of a rural preschool in a rural community of Mexico, and she truly struggled when the pandemic began. Because of the lack of resources, because of the lack of equipment, and because of the lack of enthusiasm from parents and from teachers to use technologies for preschool. So first of all, this insufficient resources caused her to consider what was the best tool to use for her remote work. And she decided that WhatsApp represented a less challenge than other platforms. So other platforms, as we talked at the beginning, would require for her an intensive training for teachers. And also it had economical implications for parents. So because of the easy access to WhatsApp, she decided that WhatsApp was going to be the platform that she would use. So she implemented a very solid plan, engaging herself, teachers, and parents to facilitate preschool children all the learning activities that were supposed to be covered. And she required parents to send on a specific schedule the learning evidences from children. So teachers could see all those evidences, and they could keep track of preschool students' learning. And everything began quite okay. Everything seemed to be working smoothly. At the beginning of this year, I remember she told me that she was very satisfied with that type of work because she could see that everyone was engaged. But the bad news came this year, this September 2020, when the music teacher asked to have a leave. So since the music teacher left, he was substituted by a new music teacher who needed to take part in all these WhatsApp chats. He was included, and on his very first day of work, he contacted parents in order to tell them what was the activity children were supposed to be doing and what were the evidences he needed to collect. But a mother in the group, who, for the purpose of this talk, we are going to call Juanita, sent him a private message to send her child's learning evidence. But nevertheless, she never thought that this private message was going to cause so much trouble. And this was because Juanita's husband, who doesn't live in the community, who lives in the US, asked his mother to check Juanita's cell phone to make sure she was not texting other men for romantic purposes. So when her mother-in-law checked Juanita's cell phone, she realized that she had a conversation with a new man. And this man had texted her recently. So Juanita's mother-in-law told his son that in fact, Juanita was texting another man. So of course, this drove Juanita's husband absolutely crazy and mad, and he asked support from other men in the community to threaten the new music teacher. So this man, or this bad man, supposedly involved in a powerful gang in the community, decided to threaten the music teacher to death. And this is the, I don't know if it is visible, the text, that is the real WhatsApp message that the music teacher got. And it says in Spanish, "I am going to kill you because you are bothering my wife. You don't know who you are messing with. We are part of the cartel of blah, blah." You probably are familiar with the increasing violence that we have in Mexico because of cartels. So this message was sent on behalf of members of the cartel, threatening the teacher to death. So after this message, the music teacher decided not to go back to the community. She told my friend, she told the principal of the school, and she also told the supervisor of the school, or the coordinator, let's say the principal's chief. And so she was called to attend, they were called to a meeting in order to make decisions about this problematic situation. And besides other decisions, one of the most important one was that WhatsApp was not going to be allowed anymore for educational purposes, and to avoid the least interaction as possible for social purposes as well among teachers and parents. So unfortunately, my friend, the school's principal, was really disappointed because something that she had created with effort had been destroyed in just one day of jealousy and machismo behaviors. So I decided to tell you this story because it's embedded in the use of WhatsApp as a didactic tool. Because it was a successful practice that my friend could work out with teachers and parents, because machismo cultural practices affected parent-teacher communication, because the entrenched violent practices in my country affected a successful dynamic in education. And last but not least, I think it's the most important, because children's learning will be affected. So these two stories that are embedded in the use of different social platforms and in education can also reflect reflect cultural components that may affect or may help in education too. So, and there are other narratives widely spread through the use of WhatsApp. And this is how we are going to close. Oh, I'm sorry. I would like to know if I was clear with the story, or if someone has a question, if something was confusing.
The story was clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nikhil. And so other urban legends that are common in Latin America, it's COVID doesn't exist. Governments have made it up to control people. Don't get vaccinated because the vaccine has a chip and governments will inject that in your body to control you. And taking the temperature with an infrared thermometer will kill your neurons. And this meme became viral because the lady was asked to be taken her temperature, and she said, using this urban legend, she said, yes, kill that memory of that bitter love. So she was really funny when she said that, and the video went viral, and we actually have, I mean, you know, Mexican culture is also famous for laughing about our own tragedies. So this is the case. She was asking to kill that memory of the love that made her so miserable. And that would be it as from us. I don't know if Tatiana would like to say something else.
No, thank you for listening to us. And yeah, I would love to hear your insights or questions.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This was really wonderful, but we feel like we have heard a lot of parallels like this from India, like even more funnier, tragic. So I would ask all to contribute, and also like if you have questions, you can either write it on the chat box or ask directly. So the floor is open for discussion.
Hello.
Hello.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Yeah.
This, in fact, resurfaces because I mentioned what I was going to ask in one of the responses to early speaker. That was about a response that whether I had a response from specific happenings in India during pandemic of new practices that were coming up, and then I happened to mention something which I've read about from Latin America, in fact from Peru. And this was during a time of high death rates and trauma. A kind of practice was revived in Peru, which they call the quipus. I don't know how they pronounce it, whether you have heard of it, I don't know, KHIPUS. And that was supposed to bring healing to people if you wrap the codes around the deceased, those who died, if you wrap them around, it's supposed to bring in healing. Basically, the idea of these strands being interlocked around us to show the relationship that the person had with the world, which is suddenly broken with this kind of a massive death rate, especially Peru had a lot of it. But then a tradition was getting revived in a contemporary time. You know what I said? The thing is, something is coming back, but it's not what it was. It is trying to address something very new, something very much contemporary. So I was wondering whether, from your experience in Latin America and Central America, there are stories like that. That's one. And I think there are other queries that have come up. So we should also take that up. Thank you.
Yeah, there are many. Like I remember, like at the beginning of the pandemic, there were many chains in WhatsApp telling you about traditional, like remedies that you could use for killing the virus. So it has become, like very, very widespread. Like, for example, I remember the use of aloe for killing the virus, but also like the use of, I forgot the name of this thing for, what is the name? I don't remember, but it's like a root that you boil and you can make like some kind of infusion with that. And actually, like then the narrative became so widely spread through WhatsApp that the sales of this root increased dramatically at the beginning of the pandemic. So you could go to the streets and you could see that this root was sold like everywhere, and it's a root that is actually, grown in all these rural areas close to where I live in Colombia. But that people usually don't buy, but because of the widespread narratives in WhatsApp, it became tremendously popular. And, like there was a boost in the sales of this traditional root that I don't remember the name right now. But yeah, things like that have also become very, very popular in Colombia. I'm sure that in Mexico as well.
As well, yes.
So I must intervene. We have a question from John. So he asks, we have struggled with issues of copyright in the use of applications and programs in teaching and communication between students, especially teachers' intellectual work or students' creative products like memes. Do you have any comments on this issue?
Okay, well, in my case, I haven't like really had like copyright issues with my students. Usually like if we had like a Zoom session and we presented like a YouTube video, that would be like an inconvenient thing, because in the Zoom session, like you wouldn't see in the recording, like you wouldn't see the video. So in that way, like the students who were not present in the session would not be able to access the video or the material that was presented in the class. And regarding like the students using of memes or material that is widely distributed in the internet, I think that what we have a struggle is to encourage students to use citation practices, so that even if it is a meme, it has like intellectual property, and that you should credit the author of the meme or things like that. And like I think that with the pandemic, like our students, especially in my case, they have become like very widely they have increased widely their creation of memes. Like there is something going on and you can see the meme produced right away. So it's like really amazing like how creative students are.
In the case of teachers' intellectual work, I think a common practice in Mexico is that teachers share their work with each other. And sometimes when they create it, there are times in which they don't even mention they are the author. I think there is a culture of cooperation, but sometimes we miss recognizing the work of other colleagues. So, but at the same time, I think it's a cultural practice to be sharing with the other person.
All right, thank you. I have a question regarding, I was trying to imagine, when you spoke about the rural and urban in Mexico, like I want to know like what percentage of, like demographically, what percentage of students belong to the rural and what uh, percentage belongs in the urban, like, rich schools, poor schools, like in between. So can you give me I need some numbers to imagine that. So can you imagine? So do you have any statistics related to that?
Um, I don't have those statistics, but I would say it's pretty even
Okay.
because even though there are plenty of urban areas, a lot of those urban areas are under resorts. So
Okay.
yes, I would my mistake. I didn't bring those statistics,
Okay.
but um, the privilege the privileged sector is not common.
Okay.
So I would say it is more common to see rural and under-resourced communities than privileged people.
Okay. And what do you think is the future in Mexico with regards to Mexico and Colombia with regards to the future of education, especially, you know, like because in India we have this uh, apps that are specially made for educational purpose. So there are these big companies, one funded by Facebook itself, which is like actually um, they have made contents for even vernacular languages, regional languages. So they are really penetrating into the market, like and like they are able to reach communities like not only English or Hindi, even other languages too. So it's like their business is really booming. So my question is whether Mexico has such a market for such an app, because I'm sure like they are like probing every nation for inroads for their business to develop, right? So and also like especially when you think that WhatsApp is a failure in certain ways because it's really unrestricted and like I would say it doesn't have the accuracy of Wikipedia, but it's basically street chatter in a different form. So, what do you think is the future for a country like Mexico and Colombia?
Tati, would you like to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think, like it can be very different according to your geographic and social position in our countries. Like you can be in the same country but have very different features. And I think because it's a country of many contrasts and many disparities. Actually, already schools that they are developing, software apps and all kind of, educational technologies for advancing education or making education more interesting or more engaging or more productive for students and all that. And and are other areas like rural areas where students are still working with handouts or hard copies of materials. But I think that even like when students are using like these handouts, like relying, on their out of school uses of digital media or the digital media that they have access to, like for example, WhatsApp, which has such a potential for interacting with multiple modes, right? And how a student can learn to make meanings and how much learning of the word they can get from that. And for example, how many opportunities for critical thinking students could have, for example, if they question the WhatsApp chains that they receive. If these things are used in education, I think that even with this, all these limitations, rural students can also develop the same skills that urban students do with all the technologies that they have at their disposals. And yeah, and in terms of market, like for example, in Bogota, that is the capital city of Colombia, it's like a metropolis. We can see that there are fairs for technologies, and there are startups for people creating robots, apps, and programs for educational purposes, and not only for educational purposes, for all kinds of purposes. So yeah, there is a lot of innovation. Actually, like the government, the Ministry of Education of Science of Colombia has also motivated, especially undergrads to create startups and to give them support for their startups that include digital technologies and all that. So yeah, it's like a big thing nowadays.
All right.
As for Mexico, I think the future of, at least of education, has a similar orientation. I think the crisis that we had to go through during the pandemic has made us resilient in many ways. So this innovation that Tatiana talks about also takes place in my country, especially in the area that I am from, which is central Mexico. And I was talking about resilience because after or during the pandemic and through all this time, there have been many efforts to improve educational spaces. So I am hopeful. I think both governments and people can make the best out of this situation. But something that I have talked to other colleagues regarding the future of education, at least, is how social skills have been affected because of this time. So probably, even though there will be efforts to move forward, I think socio-emotional skills, the affection that socio-emotional skills have can be a factor that inherits or that can be an obstacle for the development of education.
All right, thank you. Have you done any like research or observation from the point of view of the students, or like did you have like some interaction with them, like because I was talking to some kids the other day and they were very keen on going back to school. So I mean, there's one side, like Dr. Burgess said, his daughter doesn't want to go to school, but I know a couple of other kids who are like so eager to go to school, and they only have classes twice a week. But so that interaction is, that craving for interaction is actually making them, have this very different perspective. So I think people are more or less fed up of this, computer learning and all these impersonal interactions. So I mean, I guess people are divided over whether to send kids back to school or not. But my question would be, what have you observed from these two countries? Like, are people really ready to send kids back to school, or are they looking for any other alternative, like in the form of some online education or things like that? So, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. Well, in Colombia, especially like in rural communities, there is a big push, or there has been a big push from the government to go back to school. Actually, like in most rural schools, they already started going to in-person classes since last October. And well, I don't know, but in Colombia, the school calendar is different to what occurs in most of the world. So we start like the school year in at the end of January, and we end the school year at the end of November. So all of this year has been mainly remotely, but given like the big pressures from the government, like most rural schools already started like going back to in-person classes to end this school year in-person, because they have seen that, you know, it's been very hard to cope with all the limitations that rural students face. So it's better to go back to school. And well, thankfully, you know, like the pandemic, the COVID cases are decreasing in Colombia, and this has, and also vaccination for young kids started. So now in Colombia, children between 3 and 11 years old are being vaccinated. So this has also helped like to the return to in-person classes. But it varies a lot. I cannot say that there is an overall or general feeling about going back to school. I was talking with some of my colleagues last week in Colombia, and they were telling me that there were students that were absolutely happy to be back at school, but there were others that didn't want to, because they were, you know, taking away the opportunity, for example, to have jobs or to help their parents in the daily activities that they do that are mainly based on agricultural activities. So yeah, it depends of each child. Yeah, but that's what is happening in Colombia now in rural areas. Basically, they are going back to in-person classes, and feelings are divided among students about being happy to be back in person, and others are reluctant to be in person.
And as for Mexico, they a lot of schools also took a hybrid model starting September this year. Our school calendar begins in September, each September. So this September, plenty of schools came back to in-person activities. And same as Tatiana, I wouldn't generalize, but I would say the most interested in children going back would be parents, especially mothers who had to, mothers who work and who had to do everything at once, like taking care of children's school, and at the same time working for their own living, and at the same time dealing with house chores. So I would say the most or at least there is there is an enormous feeling from mothers to send back kids to school, and teachers as well. Many of the teachers believe that working online involves a lot more planning, a lot more organizing, and takes more time than actually in-person teaching.
All right. So we are almost in the process of winding up, but I got one more question that is regarding, have you come across any literature which talks about like how do students perform? Like how do they score in their tests, you know, using all these online learning, or are they better in in-person learning, or, you know, like, because that itself, that's a big question, right? Like, are they getting educated? Like, so do you have any comments on that? And then we can probably wind up, and I'll.
Yeah, like, well, I wanted to comment on that, especially because of the responses I've gotten from colleagues in Colombia, English language teachers. In Colombia, English is a mandatory second language, so it is texted in the standardized national test, and it's one of the the items of the test where students score the lowest. But it was surprising that last year the test of the results of students in the English test actually increased. So we were discussing about that, reflecting about that, and teachers were saying, well, students in the remote classes, they mainly had to read and write, and like not like in the in-person class where you focus on all the communicative skills. And they were saying, and that's what they encountered in the standardized test, like they only have to read and write. So they actually had, like a lot of practice during remote teaching for reading and writing in English. So yeah, it showed up in the students' test results. So yeah, you can see that in our case in Colombia, like it helped students like to score better in the test result. But that's just regarding to English. I have no information about the other areas. But yeah, it would be definitely interesting to know how it was for the other areas as well.
And same as or very similar to what Tatiana says, lots of colleagues from the English teaching field report that at least English teaching has moved forward, in the sense that students have achieved a certain degree of autonomy in order for them to learn from themselves, by themselves, I'm sorry. So this genuine interest in English has been so intense that it has helped them to score better in tests. Nevertheless, the teacher that I talked to, who is on preschool, who is in charge of a preschool, was telling me that for her, assessment was such a challenge, or has been such a challenge for her, because one of the aspects that children are assessed on is motor skills and how they manipulate their movements. So she was telling, or she was sharing, that motor skills was difficult to assess, and now that they came back to in-person teaching twice a week, she was sharing that she perceives how movements were not as good as they supposed to be, but by this children's age. So I think it would be interesting to look at how, depending on the area, but also depending on the age of, but also depending on students' age, assessment can take place. In some ages and in some areas, I think it's quite a challenge. Another professor from a university, from a private university in Mexico, was not complaining, but talking about the huge challenge that represents assessing dentistry students, because they are required to do things like in person. Yes. And she wouldn't know how well students were performing this skills, in which they really require their hands in order to be assessed.
Oh, all right. Thank you. So I request Dr. Vargas to say a few closing remarks about the lecture series. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Thank you, Nikhil.
And Jessica.
Thank you.
So I'll briefly put it. So thanks for this panel. It's a different dimension in terms of what I see it as a space where narratives might be in the making, educational field, because there are lots of people in the realm of education in a completely different spatiality, which is digital, which could be extended from, and where new narratives may be in the making. So how it happens in the Latin American context could be stretched from. And Thank you for adding your takes, Jessica and Tatiana, and thank you for coordinating this, Nikhil. Unfortunately, Harisa could not join, but we've been through a pretty good journey, going through historiography, going through the hegemonic power relations, going through narratives of myths like the vampire, or going through the kinds of protests and the kinds of actions that have come up in the context of pandemic. And pandemic has in fact become a meta theme in this whole conference, because that's what we've been living through, and that's inevitable, I suppose. And also bringing in lots of practices like how Andrew and Aphrodite did today. So I wouldn't say anything further. I just want to thank Theo for this formidable, bringing together such a good team in this network, and that was a major role. And people like Elisa, who've been always there, as I see all through the meeting, and a very, very good team from SSP College, who've been with Anup, and also Abhinand, Nikhil, Harisa, everyone.